It's 50 years. Like, we need to stop the infighting. We need to stop imploding from within. We need to cut off those horrible values that the Khmer Rouge instilled in our people 50 years ago, where they taught us to be enemies and not trust each other and, snitch on each other and, fight for scarcity to survive.
Welcome to Love, Listings, and Legacy, where love, community, and building a lasting impact meet. We are Moni and Sophaline, a husband and wife real estate team, sharing our perspectives on life, real estate, and philanthropy, our stories about resilience and service. Join us each week as we share our journey of life, business, and giving back, all while building a legacy for our family and community. This is Love, Listings, and Legacy, where hearts, homes, and philanthropy come together. Let's get started.
Hello, Jimnipsua, and welcome to another episode of KhmerTree. I'm Chad, your host. And on this episode, we have all the way from Livermore, California, the lovely Sophaline Mao. And Sophaline, please welcome to the show, and please introduce yourself.
Hi, well, thank you so much, Bong, and some Jimnipsua, Bong Po de Akania. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon from Livermore, California.
Yes. Sophaline and I really want to say we know each other. We kind of do and we don't. We have a lot of mutual friends. The last I checked on Facebook, we have like over 130 mutual friends, which means that we're both pretty active in the community, which is how you came onto my radar. Seems like when there's something going on, big or small, whatever, especially in California, either your name pops up, your face pops up, or, so I see you very active, and, like you've always been on my radar in one way or another. And then you and I, we met a few years ago at a mutual friend's place at a rooftop party in Long Beach. Yeah, and that was like probably my most vivid memory of you. It was real late at night. It was dark, and we were just hanging out with a bunch of friends.
Yeah. And
then shortly after, I think you were on your way out to Singapore or something like that. That's right. So we can probably talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, so once again, welcome to the show. And
thank you for having me.
Yeah, so let's start with your origin story, right? We can take it back and go from there.
All right. Well, I'm going to address you as Bong because, as you know, in our Khmer culture, it's a sign of respect for our elders. I'm not saying that you're old, but just as a Bong Padal, right? But yeah, so hi, everyone. And I just want to say thank you, Bong Chad, for the honor and privilege of being in your space today and just thinking of me for this. I'm truly honored. So thank you, first of all. And I just want to say hi to all the KhmerTree listeners. And it's such a pleasure to be here. My origin story, Bong, I mean, really succinctly, I consider myself a 1.5 generation Cambodian-American, Khmer-American. I'm actually part of the Khawidang population. And so I always say I'm a Khawidang baby. And really just at the very young age of 5 months old, arrived in Seattle, Washington with my parents, obviously, as part of the Cambodian exodus from Khmer during the Khmer Rouge regime and all that. So yeah, that's it. That's how I, pretty much landed in Seattle, Washington as a baby. And so people often ask me like, do you remember anything? Honestly, I really don't, Bong. I have to say, I don't remember growing up in the Khawidang refugee camp or anything. Yeah, fast forward later, my parents, of course, as other Cambodian refugees, we do a secondary migration. My parents felt like Seattle, Washington was too cold. We arrived in like December of 1980, and my parents were like, "Oh my God, so they said, okay, we can't hang with the snow." And so sure enough, from Seattle, we went to Dallas, Texas. My brother Sophaline was born in Texas. And then shortly after that, my parents found their way to Stockton, California, where I have to tell you, Bong, I think I'm a Stockton kid. I grew up in the 209. So shout out to all my 209 brothers and sisters. Yeah.
If I may ask, you say you were born in the camp, so where's your family from?
So mom and dad are both Phnom Penh folks. Yeah, they're city folks. My father, he grew up outside of Phnom Penh, right across the Mekong River in a small village called Chambot Mia. And right now, present day, it's probably considered but it's literally just across the bridge from Phnom Penh. So dad, I went to school in Phnom Penh, and he was in law enforcement in the 1940s and 50s.
Wow.
If you want to know about dad's life, that he had a pretty cool life. And then mom grew up in Phnom Penh as well, near Psa Tu Tumpung. Psa Tu Tumpung is now considered the Russian market. So yeah, and she went to high school and everything in Phnom Penh. So yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, did they go through the whole 4 year, of the war?
Bong.
Okay.
Yes. So yeah, unfortunately, my parents did go through the Khmer Rouge regime from April 17, 1975 until about late 1979, maybe early 1980 when they arrived in Khao Dang refugee camp. But yeah, they were part of the families who had to leave their homes and really just go off. And I believe they ended up in Battambang, near Phnom Sampho, and that's where they ended up meeting later in one of the Khmer Rouge labor camps.
Okay, so they met in Battambang during the labor camps, not in Phnom Penh. Okay, got it.
No, yeah, not in Phnom Penh, but later on, I think more towards probably, the end of it. That's probably where they met. But they often shared stories about leaving, especially my mother. She was in high school, just a teenager, kind of coming into life. She was listening to, like rock and roll music, like Luk Ta Sin Si Samut, Ye Do Sarai Satia. She was watching all the Khmer movies, going to the movies with her friends and things like that. And sure enough, they had to like evacuate. And I think my grandparents, her parents actually lived near Psa Tu Tumpung, which is now modern day the Russian market. And my grandfather worked for the Ministry of Finance. And so he was a government worker. And so obviously, they were on the list.
Yeah. It's so rare because nowadays, especially in the States, those who came from Phnom Penh and went through the war and everything, the Khmer Rouge regime either didn't make it or they went back. And so most Khmer-Americans nowadays, they're actually majority from Battambang or have some connection with Battambang.
Yeah.
And so it's really, it's really a nice treat to hear that those who came from Phnom Penh or other outside of Battambang have actually made to the States, especially this far in the journey, 50 years later.
Yeah, Bong. And just to add to that too, my dad's side of the family, like they were all executed because they were all government officials. His uncle was a diplomat, and he was able to get some of his nieces and nephews out, and they evacuated to, at the time you could either go to Burma, which is now Myanmar, or you could go to Thailand. Obviously Vietnam was going through conflict as well. And so a lot of my dad's family, they escaped just via diplomatic relations. And those who, as you said, got left behind were unfortunately mass executed by the Khmer Rouge.
Yeah. I say this a lot in my podcast. For us to have this conversation, we're so lucky. It really is a miracle for us to be here right now because of our parents and what they've been through, what they had to do to get here, to this far. Yeah. So your parents making it through all the, all the turmoil and all the chaos. And for us to be where we are now, we're so fortunate, and we are very very, very small percentage of us. Yeah. So you're born in Khao Dang, you made your way to the States and moved around a little bit and finally ended up in Stockton, California. Can't blame you. The weather's amazing. Yeah, that's a very...
Mom, you said it right. I mean, my parents are like the weather. And then, it's funny because a lot of times, as you know, a lot of Cambodian families, we move to where the community is. And my father and mother, they had friends in Stockton and they were like, well, come to Stockton. There's a lot of Cambodian families, right? And so that's what they did. After having the three of us, my parents were like, all right, we're done, right? And so they were like, all right, 3 kids in America. And it's funny because they had all 3 of us within like the first 5 years of arriving in the U.S. Can you believe it? My poor mother, can you imagine like new country? She's like, man, I got like 3 kids all under the age of like 5, these 3 little brats. And so they made a hard decision. They had tried, obviously, as you know, like you have to work, right? And so also, obviously economic opportunity is also a reason why our families move around the U.S., right? For jobs.
Yeah.
And so when you came to Stockton, obviously my dad, it was either like, go work at this buddy's donut shop, go here, go there. He ended up working as a janitor for Stockton Steel Company. It was an office, and he'd just go and 5 p.m. everyone goes home, and my dad would roll up and, he'd make sure all the offices were clean for all the executives and the management. So yeah, Mom, I grew up like seeing my dad just be very clean, because that was his job. And he took so much pride in being a janitor. I remember going to work with him sometimes, just to help him. And he didn't have me do anything crazy. He just had me like empty the paper shredder.
Yeah.
So he would be like, okay, go on shredders. And I thought it was fun as a kid, right? Because it looks like confetti.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are some of the memories I remember in Stockton. My mom decided to stay at home. So mom was a stay-at-home mom. Dad was like, all right, I'll bring home the bacon. And at the time, childcare, it probably isn't as expensive as it is now. Back in the days, you could find like a, Cambodian Yay or or Ming to watch the kids. Mm-hmm. My mom was like, I want to be a part of our children's upbringing. Like my mom and dad didn't want anyone else instilling values in us or like raising us. And so that's why they sacrificed financially, to make sure that my brothers and I had a good upbringing.
Yeah. So Stockton, it's amazing. I'm curious. So Stockton is actually one of the more populous communities in our, of Cambodians.
Yeah.
Outside of Long Beach. Everybody does Long Beach and Lowell, and then you have Stockton and Philadelphia, I think Tacoma. But so how did Stockton come to have such a big population of Cambodians? Do you know?
Yeah, I think the agricultural opportunities, a lot of Khmer at the time, in the 1980s growing up, a lot of my friends, like their parents worked in the fields and they said katkatam, right?
Yeah.
Onions, metasa, cucumbers, asparagus. And my husband, Moni, actually grew up working with the community of migrant workers. He remembers as a kid, like working strawberry, cherries, cucumbers, all that long. So I think agricultural work was available. Also, you said it earlier, the climate, right? The climate in Stockton is pretty mild. We have our hot summers. It's a nice, you get your 4 seasons. And also we had like the, Wat. So Khmer Buddhist temples were started back in the early 80s. And so I remember as a kid, like, going to the temple with my parents. And just the community just grew. And in school, middle school, high school, I always had Khmer friends. And so for me, I never questioned like, oh, who am I? I'm like, I'm Khmer, because all my friends were Khmer. We even started the Lincoln High School Khmer Student Club.
Nice.
We did like the coconut dance. We did the wishing dance. And then for Chochnam, for Khmer New Year, we sold beef sticks and got our moms to make like, mok lahong and fried rice. And we sold that at school. So for me, like growing up in Stockton, it really helped me to preserve like my Khmerness, as you say.
Yeah.
And it really helped me later on in life as well.
No, I love it. Yeah. I went to Stockton. I think I spent like a couple of days out there. And I visited Angel Cruise Park.
Yes,
right?
That's right. Yeah. Park Mok Lahong.
Yeah.
That's what they got. Yeah. Park Mok Lahong, Bong. That was from the 80s, that? Like, that was when like, yep.
Yeah. Mok Lahong. Okay. No, I love that. That sounds way better than Angel Cruise Park.
We grew up going there and like, beef sticks was like 50 cents, like 50 cents much a cat.
Yeah.
How's it saying, now it's like, dang, it's like inflation.
So that's always been there, right? That park. It's just, you said even till now, right?
Yeah, it's still there now. Yeah, no, we grew up, and then we'd go buy shaved ice, at the got chew for like $1. Mm-hmm. We'd go after school. And go hang out. Yeah.
So for those who are listening who aren't familiar with Angel Cruise Park, I'm sorry, Pat Mok Lahong, can you tell our audience what that's all about?
Oh yeah, it's just a park in Stockton. It's right off of Lincoln Road and oh my God, El Dorado. Yes, and so it's Angel Cruise Park, and our community just started it up in like the mid '80s, and Yay, they just went and they sold beef sticks, egg rolls, pong tiakon, the got chu, and sure enough, there's been times where it's gotten shut down and whatnot, but, it comes back. So yeah, but now it's expanded to like other ethnic groups as well. So now you'll see, there's some Hmong vendors selling their, organically fresh grown produce. There's also, you can get like, all the like quacko, you can eat all the stuff from Cambodia.
Yeah.
It's expanded along the offerings, but back then as kids, it was only maybe like 2 or 3 that were like selling, mok lahong and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, it might as well be like an institution at this point because
oh my God, it is.
Yeah, there should be like a landmark or something, So I remember I went there, and the lady said she had like fresh lia, right? The little clams. I was like, like what? Ban up and out. Like how old is this? Right? She goes, oh, from this morning from the river. I'm like, on a Saturday, amazing.
Oh yeah, bong crawfish, all that. You can get everything there. So yeah.
So yeah, if you ever travel through Stockton and you want like real authentic Khmer food, without. Yeah. Angel Cruise Park, go check it out. It's an experience. I think I gained about 3 pounds that day.
Yeah, it's fun. Even like fresh produce. If you want to get your like, lemongrass and kaffir lime leaves, like I still get all my fresh produce from there. I love it because, Stockton outside of the community, it doesn't have all the best reputation, whatever, but
when I went there and connected with some of the locals, man, I had so much fun, you know.
Yeah.
I think I was traveling with Pratch at the time.
Mm-hmm.
We were there for like a local event.
Yeah.
And do you know Sandra?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So she hosted us and she showed us around and and I was like,
Dr. Sandra Rooney.
Yes, Dr. Sandra. So shout out to Sandra.
She's my 209 sister. Yeah, we went to Lincoln High School and we were very active in the Khmer Student Club, Bong. So that's why I think, you know, it actually like created this love and passion for Khmer culture and community, because it really started growing up in Stockton and being around all my Khmer friends. And I wanted to touch on something that you brought up earlier. You know, Stockton often gets a pretty rough reputation when it comes to how rough it was. It truly was. And Stockton had its neighborhoods and it had its pockets of just struggle. And a lot of times now, looking back at our age in our 40s now, when I look back, Bong, it really was a product of a lot of trauma and a lot of lack of education and lack of resources. You know, a lot of our families that ended up in Stockton, they ended up in not the best of neighborhoods. And a lot of that had to do with just struggles with alcoholism and gambling and domestic violence. And later on, if you get a chance to speak with my husband, Moni, you know, he will share very openly about growing up in Stockton, just around that type of environment. And so you either kind of live in it and you kind of accept it, and because that is just how you deal with it. There weren't a lot of opportunities. And for some of us, like myself, you mentioned Sandra, a lot of other Khmer Americans of our generation, like the 1.5, a lot of us did get out, because through our healing and through seeing a lot of that, we came out and we saw another world, and we were like, there's got to be more. There's got to be more. And so anyway, later on, I can share with you about, you know, what that was like leaving Stockton as a young adult.
You want to talk about that now?
Yeah. I mean, so, you know, as I mentioned, I went to Lincoln High School, super involved in my student club. But, you know, growing up as a teenager, as you know, I'm sure there's like groups that you associate with, or maybe you get labeled something. And so for me, I actually found my with the Khmer Student Club, and the girlfriends I have now, the friends I have now, Bong, they're all doing amazing stuff. It's because school as a launching pad for our future. I fortunately was very academically driven. I don't know if that was just nature and maybe a little bit of nurture. You know, I'm also the oldest of 3 siblings. I have 2 younger brothers. And so my parents always instilled in me that, you know, you got to be a good role model. You know, you're the Bong, like, and as the Bong, you need to set a good example for your little brothers. And so growing up, I always had big shoes to fill. I always had these big expectations, but I wasn't an athlete. I was like a total nerd. You know, I did like speech and debate, drama club. I did like science Olympiad, but you know, I found my love for education in just excelling in grades. You know, I did all the advanced placement classes. I was like that total like nerd girl, but I loved it. I did student council, you know, all that. So that's how I kind of found my place in the world in high school. And then obviously growing up in the 90s, right? It was the time of like, there were Southeast Asian gangs, there were Latino gangs, there were drugs, there were drive-by shootings, there were, you know, people, there was also like, you know, just ditching school. And then, you know, some of my friends got pregnant during high school, you know, and so there was a lot of these challenges as teenagers. And then when you look at like the ability of our parents as a collective to be able to support us, they had no resources. Can you imagine? Like, you know, Matpa, they don't speak the language. They don't know how to navigate like the educational system, right? They don't know how to guide us. They're trying to like survive. And so I felt like our generation, the 1.5ers, we had to figure it out. Oh, I want a job. What do I do? Oh, I have to go and apply. Oh, and I have to do a background check. You know, Matpa, they're not going to be able to tell us what to do. So I think high school was just figuring it out. And then for me, I think what really helped me was that in the neighborhood, I grew up around Stockton, Bong. I actually had a lot of older Khmer Americans who went off to college. And I was always like admiring them. And I'm like, wow. Like I would ask my mom, like, you know, what did he move to? Where did he go? And mom would be like, oh, you know, Bong got the Rian, you know, he went to Sacramento State or he went to UC Davis. Being a teenager, I always dreamt of like independence. I was like, oh, that's really cool. Like, I want to go to college. Like, I want to be on my own and, like move out of the house. And I would see them like come home on the weekends. And I just saw how much like their parents were so proud of them when they, like, oh, my son or daughter goes to UC Davis, right, Mom? So I always I'm like, oh, I want to feel that way. And so I think I always had college, as a dream. And so, when time for graduation, I was like, dude, I'm going to college because I want to get out of here. I want to get the heck out of here. For me, I actually stayed like a year. I think I did like 2 semesters at the community college. Another struggle, and I don't know if any of our listeners as Khmer-American daughters, if you experienced this, but it was really tough for my parents to even come to the reality that I would be living away from home. So that was a big struggle. I think my parents were like, oh yeah, well, you could go to college, but just live at home. And I was like, no, going to college, like I want to experience living like the dorms and like, like joining a sorority and things like that. But my parents for the first year, I had to negotiate with them. So I struck a deal. I said, okay, well, I'm going to go to San Joaquin Delta College, which is our community college in town. It literally, it was like 5 minutes. I said, okay, I'm going to go to college. I'm going to take courses at the community college and I'm going to see how I like it. And I said, but if after 2 semesters, it's not fulfilling me and what I want for my future, I said, you guys have to let me go. And they're like, okay, deal. And so, yeah, I stayed and, I did all my GE that I could. I just like, knocked it out long. And then what I was noticing was like, you just hang out with the same group of friends and you hang out in the same environment. So your growth is a bit kind of stunted. And at the time, being 18, 19 years old, it's all good, right? Everyone's kicking it, get your financial aid checks. Like, yeah, where are we going to go? Let's go to the mall. Like, let's go, like kick it in San Francisco. And it's fun for a while. And then after that, I was like, nah, like this is not what I see for myself. And so I applied to San Francisco State University. I applied and I didn't tell my mom and dad yet because I didn't want to like get them worried until I knew I was going to get accepted. Right. And so once I got the acceptance letter, I literally like showed my mom and dad. I was like, okay, Pa, I know you don't want me to like live away from home because I'm a daughter. You got to, kind of keep me kind of like on the right track. I said, you have to trust me. I said, you didn't sacrifice all that in Cambodia and come to America for me to just like be kicking it. Right. And so they were like, okay, fine. So yeah, well, I convinced them. And then they said, well, we have, your brothers to raise. So we can't really financially, sorry, Golden, we don't have the money to like send you off to college. And I was like, it's all good. I got it. And so I told my parents, I'm like, look, I'll get student loans. I'll work. I'll apply for scholarships and grants. And I told them, I said, I'm going to move to San Francisco. I'm going to live in the dorms and you guys aren't going to pay a penny. And you know what, Mom? I did it. And all they gave me was a chnang bai, a rice cooker. I got that. I got a little bag of rice and you know what? I was good. Actually, a microwave. My mom bought me a microwave.
The bare necessities.
Yeah. And I'm telling you, like 1999, like September 1999, I landed at San Francisco State University, like as a big girl. I was like, oh yeah, wow. I'm a big girl.
Nice.
And mom and dad moved me into my dorms, Bong, and I never looked back.
Wow.
So there you have it. That was my kind of like, yeah.
That's an amazing story. And I want to say, preface that I have a special place in my heart for the eldest of first generation immigrant families because you guys, and I'm speaking on behalf of my older sister, I'm number 2 of my family. So seeing firsthand, kind of like you guys often take the brunt, right, of all the hardship that comes with the first immigration experience, translating all the documents, the government documents and so forth.
Oh my God, yeah.
And in some ways, also kind of raising your siblings, but also kind of catering to your parents, so you're kind of like wedged in between those, the 2 generations. So I hear that across the board in our community, it's very common, very prevalent, and I just, hats off to you guys and still managing to carry yourself through life, navigating for your own way.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Just like your sister, Bong, I was translating like at the age of 6, you know, the minute that my English was to the point where I could read letters and help, like, you know, like my dad was learning how to write checks and spelling out like how like on checks you have to like write out the, you know, helping Pa with that, medical appointments. And so I think I credit that to me actually being very fluent in Khmer and retaining my Khmer like 100%. I'm 100% fluent. I just can't read. So yeah, but yeah, a lot of us, the firstborn, the ones who come here, yeah, we did take on a brunt of that. And still today, I'm still the big sis. I'm still the Bong. I'm still the one that my mom comes to for stuff. And my brothers were like, man, like I tried talking to mom about like cutting back on her sugar and like, I can't talk to her. So like you talk to her, you know, like, so it still happens, Bong. Yeah. You don't grow out of it.
And you do with such poise and grace and fluidity. So
I try.
Okay, so after college, what happens after that?
Oh my God. Okay, so I have to tell you, like, okay, this is like one of the things about, you know, my parents, like, you kind of have to like negotiate with them and kind of like fit their expectations. But I probably should mention that the only reason why my parents agreed to me moving to San Francisco was I was going to major in biology. I applied as a cellular and molecular biology major. And then 2 years into that, I was like, oh my God, I hate this. And nothing against all the bio majors, but everyone's like, oh, like, you know, like she's gonna be a doctor. And I didn't become a doctor. So I have to tell you, Bong, junior year was the scariest part because I had to tell my parents like, Pa, sorry, Gon is not going to be a doctor. I changed my majors. And they were like, what? And so, yeah, I discovered the College of Ethnic Studies, fell in love with Asian American studies. And I am friends with my girl, Rata, till today because we met in an ethnic studies class and she was my first Cambodian friend at San Francisco State and we are still good friends today. Anyway, I had to tell my parents like that I switched majors. And so I ended up graduating with a Bachelor of Arts in Asian American Studies. And my dad was like, okay. He's like, I don't understand. He's like, you already Asian. Why you need to study? You know, this is him like, why you study Asian American? He's like, you are an Asian in America. And I was like, yeah, Bob, but you know, there's like a history that like we were robbed of and that we didn't learn about. And, you know, and every chance I got, Bong, I really tailored my research to Khmer, the Khmer experience, the Khmer diaspora, you know, whether it was about, you know, our experience surviving the genocide trauma. I even did research on the Cambodian deportation issue that was really big and it still is big now, you know, back then. Anyway, yeah. So after college, my parents were like, well, okay, well, since you're smarter than us and you didn't want to do bio and now you're doing Asian, now you're like, what are you going to do for work? And that was the most humbling experience because you know how like when you leave home you're like, oh yeah, like I'm an adult, like I'm never coming home. Like I don't know if you ever like I came home because I was like, okay. And this was like 2004 and I was like, dang, I gotta get a job now. And so my parents were like, yeah, so what are you gonna do now with your Asian American studies background? And so I moved out from San Francisco. I moved back home with like my tail between my legs, like, okay. And I just started applying for jobs, Bong. And I really, at that time, right, you can't be choosy. And I got hired by Wells Fargo in Stockton. And I was like, dude, I'm in financial service and banking with an Asian American, you know, studies background. I was like, what the hell am I doing? I took the job and at the time it was like $36,000 a year. And I was like, yeah, I got a job, like a full-time job. Right. But that's what you do when you're like a new grad. And then my pa were like, okay, well, you can stay with us going, but you got to like, you know, save up and whatever. And I think I want to say I lived at home for 6 months. And then my parents, even though I was now graduated and I was like, you know, working full time long, they still treated me like their little girl. And I just was like, okay, this is like cramped in my social style. I'm like, I got to be home by like 7 o'clock. Like my dad's like, where were you coming home? You know, after grabbing drinks with coworkers. I moved back to the Bay Area. I actually asked for a transfer with Wells Fargo to South San Francisco, Daly City. And that was just because I'm like, all right, I just can't live at home no more. I mean, I was like 24, 25 living at home, Bong, like with a curfew.
Yeah.
You know, I was like, all right, this is not cool. And at the time I was like, man, like I want to be going to the club. Like I want to be partying in the city. And this is when like, you know, you could actually go and like out to the clubs, and there's a huge like Bay Area DJ scene. And so you had to, you know, you had to kind of like be out there with everybody. And yeah, I'm happy I got to experience that part of my young adulthood.
Yeah. No, back then, like they called the city, right?
Yeah. The city. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember I was visiting some friends in San Jose right around that same time, actually, early 2000s.
Yeah.
And then we made the trek over to the city and kind of learned the culture there.
Yeah.
And back then it was vibrant. Like San Francisco was like popping, you know, it was beautiful. It was vibrant. There was so much going on. The nightlife was just amazing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I kind of know what you're talking about.
All the DJs and nightclubs, and there's always a nightclub popping open. You know, it was fun. But you know, I think in our 20s, it's all about having fun, right? Because you're like, okay, I finished school. Now what? But, you know, for me, I ended up staying in the Bay Area. And so, obviously there was this huge global economic crash, right? 2008, and financial services, Wells Fargo, just everything just went down the drain. Everyone, you know, obviously the mortgage industry just went downhill. And at the time I was able to get a job, and I actually switched from banking and financial services to biotech. So this is like kind of like your resilience in life. You just figure it out, right? Like, and also being Khmer-American, it wasn't like, I don't know anybody like in other industries and everyone's trying to figure it out at this time. I ended up in biotech, and I ended up working for Novartis Pharmaceuticals in Emeryville. And there I was like, you know, I was able to write really strong reports, and that probably helped my college days, you know, being able to write 20-page research papers. And so I worked for Novartis while I did quality assurance. It was really boring, but it was a job and I had benefits. And then from there, I found my way to another biotech called BioMarin Pharmaceutical. And that launched me into kind of away from like the sitting and writing like boring reports to actually more of a commercial organization. When you go and market drugs after FDA approval, how do you do marketing? How do you do sales? How do you do key opinion leadership stuff? And so at BioMarin, I think that's where I got my taste of like sales and marketing and world travel. So, yeah.
So you're in your 20s at this point, mid-20s?
Yeah, I was like 27, 28.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was just kind of like life. And, you know, at the time, you know, I was in a long-term relationship, and, you know, we were engaged to be married at the time. In 2008. You know, I lost my dad very unexpectedly. He suffered a heart attack, and just like a lot of my parents, you know, that fear of going to the hospital. You know, my dad, I think, you know, who knows what would have happened if he probably got to the hospital a little bit sooner. But he waited for me. He wanted to make sure I was there with him. And sure enough, we took him to the ER, and, you know, he suffered a coronary artery rupture. And so, you know, he passed away in 2009. And then I was like, okay, now what? You know, now I'm like, you know, my mom was only 50 when my dad died. You know, she's a young widow, and she's, you know, my brothers and I were all adults by this time. We weren't at home. And so now we're dealing with our mom being an empty nester, just losing her husband. And she's like going through a depression. She's trying to figure stuff out. And then I'm trying to figure stuff out. And then at the time, it was just really tough on my relationship with my fiance at the time. And, you know, I did a really courageous thing, and it didn't feel right. And I called off the wedding. I called off the wedding like 3 days before. You know, we had the whole Khmer ceremony. Everything was all set. We had the hotel, we had the reception, we had like 350 people. And 3 days before, it just hit me like a brick. And I was like, I can't go through with this. This is not for me. And the one thing that my mom said, and this is, you know, sometimes with the Cambodian parents, they seem really like tough, and they seem really kind of like, you know, like that like hard parenting style, but sometimes, you know, they have a softness to them too. But I think the one thing that I had the courage to like call off the wedding, which changed the whole trajectory of my life, was my mom said, "You will always be my daughter. You do what's best for you." She's like, "I don't care if you call off the wedding, and if people want to say whatever they want to say." She's like, "I don't care." She's like, "No matter what, your happiness is important to me, and you do what you need to do, going." And the minute that I got that from her mom, I was like, done. You know, and that sometimes, you know, we go through like a really big moment in life, and this one decision, you know, can impact the rest of your life. And I think had I gotten married at the time, you know, I don't think my life would be where it is today. So have courage. Sometimes you have to make those really tough decisions. And a lot of times in our community, we worry about what other people are going to think. We worry about judgment. We worry about our parents. What are the other, what are the elders going to say to our parents, and once you get over that, we're like, I don't care. It's not their life. It's not their marriage. Right. So that's really what helped me to get through that time.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you being open and transparent and sharing your vulnerability, because such is life, right? In the journey of life, there's so many twists and turns and unexpected events and things happen, and you're forced to kind of make hard decisions. But that's what shapes us,
Yeah,
and then us coming from like an immigrant community, as small as we are, we still have to deal with just life in general, So there's this added layer of things that we have to just deal with. So it also speaks to your tenacity, your grit, your perseverance, and then it also kind of revealed like your mom's love, right? Did it reveal like a side of her that you didn't really quite expect?
Yeah, I always knew she always had my back. I think probably because I'm her only daughter. Yeah, sometimes like we always it's sometimes it's in our head like, oh my God, like I don't want to disappoint my mom or my dad, but at the end of the day, they love you. They will support you, just like when I changed majors, my dad probably, he didn't talk to me for like 2 months, but he got over it. I mean, he still came to my graduation, and he still knew that his oldest daughter, after, leaving, after having his family executed because they were educated, coming to America, working as a janitor, his daughter graduated from college, Bong, so what if I'm not a doctor, but I still fulfilled my commitment to that. And so, and then, following just my career, and then, after making a really tough decision personally, and I was like, you know what, I'm not getting married. And so, at the time, like I was turning 30 and all of my girlfriends were getting married. They were starting their families. I probably went to like 6 or 7 weddings. I was in weddings. I was a bridesmaid. I was like, okay, so you know what I did, Bong? When I hit 30, I was like, okay, all right, Sophaline, you're 30. Now what? Right? It's like, now what? And so I decided to go back to get more education because I'm like, I don't have a spouse. I don't have kids. I'm like, my career is great. Can it be better? Of course. And so I said, this is the time in my life to invest in myself. And so I, checked out a bunch of grad schools, and I always knew I wanted to do something in business. Now having, as I shared with you, like being on the commercial side of like pharmaceuticals, I'm like, all right, well, let's just go get my MBA. And so I just checked out business schools. And then in 2010, I applied to the University of San Francisco. This is the private Jesuit school that's in the city. And yeah, Bong, I got accepted. And then I decided to do a dual degree program, which everyone at the time told me was like, girl, you're crazy. What are you doing? Like, you got a full-time job and you're going to get 2 master's degrees? Like, nah, like that's crazy. Like, you're not going to have a life. And I'm like, well, I don't have a life now. Like, I was like, well, I was like, I don't have a partner. I don't, I was like, I can do this. And so, despite hearing a lot of concerns, I could say, from, even my mom and my friends and stuff, I still did it, Mom. I still did it. And I went to school part-time. It took me 4 years and a lot of money later, which I borrowed. There's no shame in getting student loans because, you know what, it's an investment in yourself. And sure enough, 2014, I graduated and I got my MBA and I got a master's in Asia Pacific Studies. And at the time, I actually switched jobs. So I went from pharmaceuticals to high tech. So I was working for Salesforce, the tech company in San Francisco.
So it seems like Asian studies is kind of like your center line in your academic career. Why is that?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's funny because my undergrad, Asian-American studies, was all about the plight of the Asian-American groups in the U.S., right? So I learned all about like the, Chinese-American, Japanese-American, Vietnamese-American, Filipino-American history here in the U.S. And then I always knew that I wanted to do something abroad. And so this is when I got the travel bug. And I love that you asked that question because it's like, why the Asia Pacific? Because I was like, why not? And I was like, I'm Cambodian-American. Asia is this whole massive continent, right? There's so much opportunity there. I just needed to find the right niche. And so that's why I decided to do a master's in Asia Pacific Studies, because that was more of a focus on the Asia Pacific, which I didn't get a lot of in my undergrad. My undergrad was all about like the experiences like in the US. And then going and getting my master's in Asia Pacific Studies allowed me to understand like philosophies of like Eastern Asia. And so like if you're doing business out there, like also understanding like the geopolitical history and like economics, culture, religion. It was so cool, Bong. I loved it so much. And I think that was what allowed me to then later on move my career to Singapore and to run, you know, the Asia Pacific region, because it provided me with the foundation that I needed.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, the reason why I ask is I have some other friends who kind of went the same route, Asian studies.
Yeah.
But for them, it was more personal in the sense that they wanted to learn more about Cambodia, like their roots, their cultures, and so forth. Like, you know, who am I? Because, you know, mom and dad wasn't much of a reference, or it wasn't there.
Yeah.
You might know like Dr. Christine Su, who's now in
Dr. Christine. Yeah.
So I've interviewed her as well in another episode, and she shared that she got into Asian studies to kind of learn more about her cultural roots on her dad's side. And I've had the conversation with a few others as well who's kind of went down the same path. And there's like, Chad, I just want to learn more about my people, you know, Khmer people, Khmer culture, but there wasn't much out there that's specific. So then they kind of focused on Asian studies. But even with that, there wasn't a whole lot of content around Khmer specifically. So that was,
that's
again,
true.
this is like back in the day where there was like less information, you know.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No,
okay.
And I even always tailored my research to Khmer as well, you know, even in graduate school. If it was like cultures and religion, or if it was like history or something, I always found a way to tie it back to Cambodia, because to your point, there was nothing out there. But anyway, it was a great experience.
So this laid the foundation for you to go abroad, which brings you to, was it Singapore, Salesforce? Yeah. How was that?
Yeah. So that's when I saw you and, you know, a bunch of our friends in Long Beach. That was like my farewell, you know, went to just kind of hang out in Long Beach before I moved to Singapore. That's probably when I last, saw you and we're all hanging out. I moved there in, October 2016, and, I had spent 5 years working for Salesforce in San Francisco. I was in global revenue operations, and I had an amazing career there and just loved it. And then during that time, Bong, I was doing graduate school part-time. That was really insane. But yeah, I think that was what gave me the opportunity, because I think now that I had the business foundation, I had the Asia Pacific Foundation, I took like Mandarin classes, I speak Khmer, speak Khmer fluently. I also speak Thai, you know, like a conversational Thai, like I can go and, you know, travel around Thailand and be able to converse and also sit in business meetings and kind of follow along. But yeah, I was there for 2 years. They had me manage the Salesforce consulting partner ecosystem. And that was basically just making sure that Salesforce was really strategic in certain markets. And so I had 2 markets. I had a mature market. So they kind of considered like Australia, New Zealand, Hong Kong. Those were considered like mature markets for Salesforce because they had already had presence there. They had customers there. They had a lot of business there. And then a bulk of my job was to cultivate the emerging markets. And so those were the countries in ASEAN. So like Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, you know, Philippines. And so I was always traveling. I was based in Singapore. Like my home base was Singapore, Bong, but I had such a large region to look after that I was always traveling. So that was pretty cool.
Wow, that must have been an amazing experience. Yeah, I remember when you went to visit us in Long Beach, we were on the rooftop party, and I remember like meeting you for the first time, and my impression of you was like, man, this girl is like, she's really cool. You know, she's funny, she's energetic, and you know, great vibes. And where did she come from? And it was just you were just like a perfect fit into our little circle of friends. And then we find out you're leaving the next day or whatever. It's like, oh man, she came in, she had such a good time. Now she's gonna leave us. So that was really fun. Yeah, and then from Singapore, you made your way to Cambodia, right?
I sure did. Yeah. So how was that, Mong?
Yeah.
I don't know. Now that I look back, I'm like, yeah, no, it was crazy looking back and like how I made that decision. But so with Salesforce, it was a 2-year assignment. You know, that was my commitment. And usually what they do is after 2 years, you have to decide if you want to stay because they have to request for your employment visa to be able to stay and work in Singapore. And at the time I was like, okay, oh my gosh, I have, you know, and I had to decide because they had to do all the paperwork. So anyway, I was like, okay, so I had this opportunity to move to Phnom Penh. And one of the things that I noticed while I was working for Salesforce, Bong, was I was like, how come Salesforce isn't in Cambodia? Like, you know, they went to Thailand, they were in Vietnam, and I was flying in and out of Bangkok all the time, meeting with like, all the big Salesforce customers like Thai Airways, all the banks in Thailand were using Salesforce. And then Vietnam, we were establishing a presence in Vietnam. There were a lot of huge telecoms and banks in Vietnam. I was like, Khmer, there's a country in the middle. What did y'all do? Like, did you guys just like fly over Cambodia? One of the feedback was that, oh, well, there's no, we don't have Cambodian presence because there's nobody there like to do it. And we need local support. So it's one of those crazy things long in life where you're like, well, if no one else is going to do it, should I do it? Like, oh, maybe I should, like if not me, then who?
Right.
And at the time there was an opportunity to join an existing software company in Phnom Penh, and they wanted to be the first Salesforce consulting partner. And so I, again, packed all my stuff and moved to Phnom Penh. And I was there for like 2 years, and I was there during the outbreak of the coronavirus and all that. So I was in Phnom Penh during the beginnings of the pandemic, and I was like, so yeah, I was there. And then I came back to the US in November of 2020. Yeah.
Just real quick, for those who aren't familiar with Salesforce, can you give like a brief description of what that is?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So Salesforce is an enterprise software system, customer relationship management. So a lot of companies, especially large companies, have to have like a cloud-based platform where they keep all their customer data, contacts. There's also service. So like if you had like a service desk where you're managing service tickets, you need to have a system to manage all that. But a huge multi-billion-dollar tech company, and they were trying to grow their footprint across the Asia Pacific. And so I was there, and my job really was to wine and dine partners. And so like I would have to go to like South Korea and like hang out with like the Samsung and LG consulting side and like the Deloitte, PwC, and just basically you build these relationships so that they can invest in Salesforce. But it's a pretty complicated system if you're going to implement it. And so you need consulting partners to help you build it.
Yeah, it's very robust. Because when I first heard of Salesforce, I thought it was like a CRM, just like something really simple.
Yeah.
But it's way more than that.
Now, it's grown. But yeah, but in Phnom Penh, it was really great. I'm happy to share any stories about that. But one of the things I realized living in was I'm like, I'm so American, right? Because growing up here, like growing up in Stockton, we're like, yeah, we're Khmer, right? Like I speak Khmer, and every time like someone's like where's your ancestry from? I'm like, oh, I'm Khmer. And then when I lived in Cambodia, I'm like, I'm so American. And like the locals didn't treat me like I'm Khmer. I mean, obviously physically I am, but when I open my big mouth, they're like, oh, ni ma pia mrek go na gang, like they would just, tease me and stuff like that.
Did they call you a Nikachun?
A Nikachun, yeah.
So for those who aren't familiar, what does that mean?
A Nikachun is just like a foreigner. It's like a foreigner, but you're a foreigner of like Khmer descent. And then they have a funny term. They call it a Nikachuan. Like instead of Nikachun, a Nikachuan, like Gichuan, like step. Yeah. They like kind of play on words. But I had to. The first few months was interesting, because Cambodia, if you can imagine, Mong, is like brand new. And so you have to develop the market. You have to do market education, meaning that you have to teach businesses and companies in Cambodia, like, why should you have your data in the cloud and in a CRM and not like in a book or like in an Excel sheet? So it was challenging, but thankfully I was able to, land some pretty key clients that helped to kind of then take the Salesforce business like to the next level.
Yeah, because Salesforce again is very big and robust and very advanced. Do you think that you at the time you were kind of maybe like a little ahead of yourself or ahead of the times, and then with COVID being in the mix as well, it really made things pretty difficult?
Yeah. So I think the first year I was like, oh my gosh, like, okay, where's the low hanging fruit? Where do I need to go? And so actually, Bong, I found successes with a lot of multinational companies with a presence in Cambodia. A lot of times the CEOs or the country directors were foreigners. And so a lot of these foreigners had already used Salesforce from the US, Australia, and Europe. And so I was like, great. Like, I'm from the US. There's a connection there. Obviously, like culturally, it was easier for me to like go grab a beer with them, go grab a glass of wine, talk about Salesforce. I could obviously do presentations and in fluent English. And so I was able to do it that way. And actually I landed some pretty big clients, like the number one brokerage in Cambodia, the chairman, he's a foreigner, and they're all used to using Salesforce in Europe. They're like, yeah, duh, why not? Like, why wouldn't you use Salesforce? So I was able to kind of penetrate the market through a lot of the foreigners that were living there. And so I went to a lot of the American Chamber of Commerce events, like Euro Chamber, started hanging out with our friends at the U.S. Embassy in Cambodia, because naturally you can relate to them, like American pop culture stuff, culturally, you know, like you grew up in America, so it's easier to hang out long. And then I had to then learn how to navigate the business environment locally. And so a lot of the Cambodian conglomerates, big companies, the owners or the shareholders are Khmer, but they usually hire a foreigner to be the C-level. And then usually the middle manager is a Khmer person, because that person is bilingual and that person can kind of manage the individual contributors. And then they also can manage up to the C-level person. That was kind of the trend when I was there. And now I'm starting to see a lot more Khmer CEOs, because a lot of Cambodians have gone on to get higher education in the UK, Australia, and the US. And so many of them have gone back to Cambodia. And now they're in these positions of leadership because they've been educated here in the West.
Right. And so back then when you were, doing all that, what year was it? How old were you?
This was like 2018. It was 2018. So just right before the pandemic. Yeah. So from like 2018 to like 2020.
Okay. Yes. So you think if you were to go back and do that all over again, you think you'd have more success the next time around?
That's a great question. Well, I think if I were to go back and I would do things differently. First of all, I think also too, I had to learn how to manage staff, local Khmer staff, manage them in a way that was effective for the local Khmer like context, but also with a bit more of a Western type of a leadership style. So I learned different styles of management, because Khmer style is very like top down, and oftentimes like you're just an order taker. You don't question your management, your leadership. You're just an order taker. But then also probably like my style was a bit more like empowering. So like my staff of like my team of consultants and developers, they were the most brightest and smartest young talented Cambodians. I'm telling you, they are amazing. And I was like, no, they are smart. They are capable of like, as you know, like in consulting, like you have to bring solutions to the client. You can't just sit there and be like, oh, there's a problem. There's a bug in the system. No, fix it. Right. And these guys were so amazing, Bong. And I think, they had I think they had a great time with me. I mean, the feedback they always give me is just like, they really enjoyed my management style, because I empowered them. I wasn't there to manage them. I was there to lead them. I was there to support them, and I was there to back them up if they knew there was a system bug, if they knew that, you should tell the client, like, this is not best practice. I would have their back, and it actually allowed them to be better consultants. Well,
yeah. As you're saying that, I'm running some numbers in my head, because as we speak, Cambodia, I believe, has a population of like 17 million people, and half of that are under 30, I believe, or under 40, right?
Yes, a very young population.
Yeah. Imagine an entire country, was that 8 million people or so? Young generation Z, millennials, who are just young, dynamic, hungry. They're learning so much. They're connected with the rest of the world. They're tech savvy.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like a whole entire workforce that has, in my opinion, has yet to be tapped into, really.
Absolutely.
And so I think, and now with everything advancing, from what I can see from here, from a distance, I see Cambodia developing so rapidly. I think it's one of the fastest growing economies in Southeast Asia right now, right?
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think if you were to go back now with these ideas, the concept will probably be more, better understood.
Yeah, well, and in any entrepreneurial venture, there's always risk. There's always like, you're kind of flying the plane while you're building the plane, right? And you're just like trying not to crash. But I think Cambodia is definitely prime to the digitization of like business, right? So other companies like SAP, there's these huge conglomerates, there's these huge companies that need these ERP systems. And so, it's prime. And to your point, you mentioned a very young population. They're also English fluent as well.
Yeah.
A lot of the young generation now, such as like my nieces and nephews that are growing up in Cambodia now, they all grow up from kindergarten speaking English. They go to Khmer school and they go to an English school, and then some kids go to a Chinese language school. So Cambodia is a population of multilingual talent, right? Not just Khmer and English, but But if you were to travel to Phnom Penh today, you would hear little kids speaking English to each other, and their mom and dad, they're speaking Khmer, But, I just had such an incredible experience, just being there locally, and I just felt at home. And also for me, like getting to live in a city where my parents grew up in, although they didn't have any Starbucks, when they were growing up at the time. But Phnom Penh, I mean, there's like a Starbucks in every neighborhood. There's like a Gloria Jean's coffee. There's like Carl's Jr. Like
there's brown everywhere.
There's brown coffee. So, I found great pride living there, and I was always so proud to tell people, even when I travel to like India or South Korea, Malaysia, Indonesia, they all think I'm Indonesian. They think I'm Malaysian, Filipina, I was so proud to just tell them, no, I'm Cambodian, right? But I think if anybody who's listening, like if you ever had like that itch and you're like, I wonder what it's like to live in Cambodia, go do it, because you won't get that time back. And now being married and we're settled here in Livermore, like I'm so glad, Mong Chad, I'm so glad that I did that. And no matter the struggles of like with the humidity or the monsoon seasons or trying to, navigate my way around, I love it because what? Number one, it helped me to really solidify who I am. I am Gon Khmer. Secondly, it absolutely 100% improve my Khmer fluency. I have technical Khmer words now. I know how to address different levels of authority in terms of like business, right? How do you address the CEO versus someone who's, individual contributor? I've picked up the language so much more than I would have if I was just doing business here. Then lastly, I get to make an impact. My husband and I, we serve on the board for a nonprofit called Caring for Cambodia. We celebrated 22 years today of education in Siem Reap, 21 schools. We do teachers education, provide basic needs for the community there. The kids don't go to school hungry. They get babal in the morning. They have nutritious food. They have bicycles. Caring for Cambodia, I think, is now my next thing. Now like having lived in Cambodia, now I get to still be a part of Cambodia's future, but I get to do it from, being on the board for this nonprofit.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah.
So let's come to present day.
Yeah.
What do you got going on? What's on your plate?
Oh my God. Present day, like I feel like my life has completely gone like 180, we were just talking about being a career woman, like in Asia and traveling and living out of a suitcase and just being here and there. Well, now, my suitcase got dust. It's up in the attic. I don't really travel much. My husband, Moni, and I, 2 years ago, I joined my husband on his real estate business. Just together, we are a husband and wife real estate team. At the moment, we're with Compass. Compass is our brokerage. We have an assistant, and so we are just running a little small real estate business, and we're helping local families build their generational wealth through real estate, Bong, and we're helping families who need to sell, whether it's a death, a divorce, kids are moving out, they need to move out of state, and so we're just helping our clients achieve their next journey through selling. Mostly represent a lot of sellers. My husband's been in the real estate business for like 17 years, and then prior to that, he was a Livermore police officer here serving the community since 1995. So he's really built a strong community base here. And so, and then when I joined the business, we started acquiring a lot more Khmer families because my Khmer fluency living in Cambodia has now enabled me to help serve our Khmer community here. We can say, we grew up in, we're Khmer, we can speak Khmer, but there's a different level of Khmer when it comes to like explaining contracts, explaining mortgages, explaining financial terms, especially for the Cambodians who have just immigrated here. I'd say within like the last 10 years, they really need that deep fluency to build that trust and for them to truly understand like the terms of like a contract. So I'm proud to say like I've been able to help bring in a lot more of our Khmer clients and helping our community here.
I'm ashamed to say I don't know much about Livermore. So on the map, proximity, like where is it at in proximity to, like, let's say Stockton or?
Yeah, we're like 45 minutes a little southwest of Stockton. We're in the middle between San Francisco and Stockton. It's like off of 580. It's a population of about 97,000, and we've got 55 wineries. It's a small wine country. We're not as famous as Napa, but we've got 55 wineries here. We have 2 national laboratories, and so Livermore was started in the 90s when they opened the Lawrence Livermore National Lab. And so we have a huge physicist population, nuclear scientists, a lot of really smart people with PhDs. And we also have Sandia National Laboratory that has a presence here as well. Other tech companies like TopCon. But yeah, Bong, we're just right after the Altamont, like the windmills and all that. So we're right across the hill from Tracy, but it's a great community. It is the burbs, and never did I think I would be living in the burbs, but I have to tell you, Bong, it's kind of nice not fighting for parking. And when you got to go grocery shopping, they're like, oh, let me just run into Trader Joe's, or, it's so nice here. Yeah. And today, so my husband, he has 2 sons. And so I'm proud to say I have 2 adult stepsons, Andrew and Ryan. Andrew's 29. Ryan's going to be 28, I think. And we also have a 5-year-old grandson. So once I married my husband, I became an instant mom and instant grandma. And so that's why I was telling you, this weekend we had our 5-year-old grandson, and I'm his yay, and it's just everything he just wants me to do. The bathroom duties, it's yay. He doesn't want his tata at all. Yeah, well, that's it. Just like family life. I think family right now is, I think, my number one priority, aside from helping my husband run our real estate business. Bong, the family needs a CEO. So I gotta be the CEO of the family, or the COO. And really just being an auntie. And, my brothers now have like 2 sons of their own. And aside from that, my husband and I, we serve on a bunch of nonprofit boards. So I mentioned Caring for Cambodia. I also sit on the board of a nonprofit called Tri-Valley Haven here, which has been for the past 47 years supporting survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. And so we have confidential shelters here where women, men, children, anyone experiencing domestic violence or sexual assault has a hotline, and that our counselors and our staff are right there with them. And we work very closely with the police departments, and we provide a safe refuge for those who are escaping violence. We have a food pantry so that they don't have to worry about where the next meal is coming. And then we also have a thrift store that we run as a nonprofit so that community members donate, and then all the revenue goes back to our confidential shelters. That's it, Mom.
Oh, that's it. Okay, that's all.
And then this year I decided to kind of up my real estate business a little bit. So I joined the board of directors for the Women's Council of Realtors for Alameda County. That is a network of women in real estate, and I'm the director of events.
It's incredible.
I don't know. It's crazy. Oh, and then our podcast, right? Just like you, so my husband and I launched our podcast. We're at our 12th episode of Love, Listings, and Legacy. And we, just like you, Bong, we wanted to create a platform where we could share our journey, our struggles, our advice, and hope that we can empower and inspire and teach, or just give fun stories to our audience. But we wanted to focus it on love being, love makes us all wake up in the morning, right? Love for our family, love for our community, love for life itself. And then we wanted to incorporate listings because my husband's got so much knowledge just about real estate that could really help someone if they're looking to change the trajectory of their family's financial well-being, So he wants to share a lot about that. And then last is just the legacy. And I think you and I talked about the legacies that you leave behind after you're gone, and what does that mean? And, for the next generation of Khmer-Americans, what does that mean? And what can our journey as 1.5 generationers help them? So
let's talk about that. So as I mentioned, this year 2025 is the 50-year anniversary since the war broke out in Cambodia in 1975. A lot has happened, obviously. Amazing story, amazing journey that you've had, and along with so many others. However, going into the next 50 years and beyond, we got an empty slate full of new ideas and possibilities that we can work towards. So if I may ask you, Sophaline, what is your vision for the next 50 years as it relates to yourself, your family, our community, and our people at large?
Well, no, thank you. And it's incredible to even think that, April 17th, 1975 was 50 years ago, like 5 decades. And we've lost so many of those stories, Bong, just through our elders just aging out. And I love what you're doing to preserve these stories. And I hope that what I see is that after 50 years, our community is starting to acknowledge that we are survivors, right? I think when we're kids growing up, like we often hear our parents talking about it, but it was more from kind of like, oh, we're victims, we're victims of a genocide. And now I'm starting to hear like this different narrative of like, no, we are survivors. And yes, the genocide is in our history, but as a community, we are more than that. And so I see this revival of Khmer arts, culture, food, music, martial arts, right? And I didn't see that growing up. I'm sure you probably feel the same way. Most of the culture we got growing up was just going to the temple for Khmer New Year, right? And like, oh yeah, we celebrate Khmer New Year in April. But now it's like music generation, embracing music from the past, carrying on, playing Mahari, or playing Samai, playing Boran, Bam Junpo, ceramics, martial arts, Mokatao. It's just incredible, Bong. So I feel like for our diaspora, outside of Cambodia, I think that I see us reverting back to like learning the language. And I see it on social media all the time where it's like, in Cambodia, we don't say blah, blah, blah. We say, so there's like a lot of that. I think social media has really created this platform for our community to really come to it, right? And really, truly like, embrace, Khmer culture. And I don't know, I'm just excited. I think also another thing that I see is like healing. And I think healing comes with like addressing our trauma. And there's so many resources out there, podcasts, YouTube videos where people are opening up about their trauma and that transmission of trauma to the next generation, Bong. Now that we know better. We're more educated. Mental health is such an important part of what was missing when our parents were trying to survive, right? We have more Khmer speaking mental health professionals, psychologists. We're actually like addressing that. So I see the next 50 years as a period of just reinvention and revival, Bong. And I think the healing journey begun, even though we probably didn't officially know that it began a while ago. But even for myself, I'm turning 45 this year. And so for me, being at my midlife point, like being able to now having the courage to share, right, Bong? Like sharing with you and sharing with your KhmerTree audience and sharing with our audience out there that, yeah, as Khmer-Americans, we had it differently, like we had it differently and that it's okay. And that it's okay to figure it out along the way. And that the main thing is that, you know who you are at your core. And I think for me, I've always known like, I have a Khmer-ness in me. And it comes out also in how I lead my stepsons. My husband raised them here in Livermore in a predominantly white community. And so they lost a lot of the culture. They lost a lot of the values. And so for me, as now coming into their lives as their stepmom, Bong, I get to now pass on those cultural values to them and also to our grandson, I don't know if that was a long-winded way of answering your question, but that's what I see the next 50 years. Yeah.
No, that's so beautiful because, again, I've known of you and everything, and now having known you better, it's beautiful that you're still connected. You're still rooted to our culture, our heritage, our history. And that's something that we need more of going forward because so many of us kind of lost that connection, the last 50 years, especially here in America. We're so small as a community. We're not even a minority. We're like a micro minority.
We're like,
Here in America, I think the number was 340,000 people as of the last census. And so we're like we're like 0.1% of the population.
Yeah.
And because we're so few and far between, there's less connection, there's less conversation, there's less of a need for our language and our culture, less of a demand. So for people like you who are intentionally staying rooted and connected and also sharing, you mentioned this revival, this renaissance, right? Yeah, so hopefully here at KhmerTree, we're doing exactly that, where, the analogy of KhmerTree, as you can imagine, is that we all come from the same roots.
Yeah.
We had this terrible thing that happened that stunted our growth. But with time, with love and perseverance and grit, we've all we're growing again. And every branch, every stem, every leaf, every molecule represents someone or a group of us. However, we're all connected together, right? And so with your leadership, with your drive and your fervor, I don't know how you do it, but you're doing it.
Lots of coffee.
Yeah. So it's just people like you that's going to allow our this tree, our community to really grow and not just grow, but also thrive going into this next era. So that's real. I'm really hoping that, more of these conversations will be had. And so I hope that our audience will learn new things and new ideas from you and others. But, thank you so much for sharing that. That was really amazing, really beautiful. And you do it also effortlessly and so beautifully and gracefully.
Thank you.
And your husband, he sounds like an amazing person. I can't wait to meet him and maybe have him onto the show as well and learn about his story and share
absolutely.
It. So, yeah. So on that note, so for those who are listening and they want to connect with you, they want to reach out to you, how can they do that?
Absolutely. I would love to connect with you. So I am on Facebook, Sophaline Mao, and I'm also on Instagram, Sophaline Mao. I'm on LinkedIn as well for those of you who are, looking to connect on the professional side of LinkedIn. And I'm always open, Bong Chad. I get DMs from other members of the community like, hey, Bong, I'm going to college and I heard about, so-and-so mentioned you. I'm always open for a Zoom call or a phone call, Bong Chad. I'm not a gatekeeper of information. I just feel like if we have something to give, why don't we just give, and sometimes information is so valuable. If you can't give money, you can give information, you can give time, you can give attention, you can give compassion. And that's one of the things I wanted to end this, this session with you, Bong, is just like our community can do so much better, and it just needs to start with thinking more as a unit versus like dividing ourselves. And I think that's one of the legacies of the Khmer Rouge that I want to stop, is that legacy of pitting each other against each other. Like we don't need that. It's 50 years. Like we need to stop the infighting. We need to stop imploding from within. We need to cut off those horrible values that the Khmer Rouge instilled in our people 50 years ago, where they taught us to be enemies and not trust each other and, snitch on each other and, fight for scarcity to survive. Bong Chad, my last thing is I want to say to everybody, we need to cut that off. We can remember and honor the history and the people who perished, but let's stop that legacy. Like that legacy of like infighting and horrible, like doing horrible things to each other, that needs to stop. And it needs to stop like with us, like this generation. We can break that cycle. Chacha, our elders, they didn't know any better. They didn't have the tools, but like us, like now we have those tools, we have those resources, and we need to like use our voice to create more unity, not divide each other, not go and like spread all this hate and like be a troll on the internet. Cause and that's one of the things too, right, Mong, is, like when you put stuff on the internet, you just gotta, they're going to come, but you have to be bigger than that. You gotta be more courageous than that. And I think that's all I want to say, is that we really need to be better, because for the next 50 years, we have to set an example for the younger generation. And if they see us fighting, what are they going to do, Bong? They're going to think it's okay, and so we got to be better.
Yeah, no, as you're saying that, I'm getting chills because it just resonates with me and every fiber of my being, but also our audience. This audience, this platform is made, like I said before we started, this is about positivity. It's about moving forward. It's about being constructive and productive. I really want to make the distinction that, going into the next 50 years, there's a very fine line on the sand that all the troubles, all the adversity, all the hate and animosity, all the strife that we've had in the past, we're going to leave that in the first 50 years. But all the goodness, all the positivity, all the things we've learned from those first 50 years, we're going to apply it into the next 50 years. So that going forward, we're making leaps and bounds, right? We're going to go from surviving to thriving, right?
Absolutely.
And because also to reiterate, because we're so small, we have to work that much harder, right? To really come together and put aside our differences and forgive each other. I know we've hurt each other in the past. I've been hurt. I've hurt others, I'm sure. And we really want to make an effort to kind of, hey, let's just make peace, right? Let's bury the hatchet, whatever that may be. Let's put peace between us and let's move forward together, right? Collectively. But yes, I love your message, Sophaline, and I love what you're doing, and you lead by example.
Thank you.
all the things that you and your husband are involved with. This is incredible. So I really hope that those in our audience who are listening to your story and hearing this would feel inspired. They've learned from you. You being open to them reaching out to you and then making this connection. So, and then, I love wine. I've been to Napa. I've been to Sonoma. Now I got to go to Livermore.
Yeah, you guys got to come to Livermore.
So, so having said all that, do you have any closing remarks for our audience?
Well, I just first of all want to say thank you, Bong Chad, Bong Pro, and Akun, Puming. Thank you all. I just want to say that you just be the best person that you could be. And whether you're on your beginning journey of understanding your Khmer culture, or whether you're like Bong Chad and I, where you grew up in it, there's always more to learn. And so, just have that learner's mindset and be open to things, and definitely love to connect. And just want to thank you all so much. And it's been my honor, Bong Chad. Thank you for including me in this KhmerTree journey of yours. And thank you for all that you do as well.
Well, thank you for being here. I know it took a lot of moving things around for you to make time for us today, because logistically it was tough, but I'm so glad.
Happen, right?
Yeah, no, I'm so glad you're able to carve out some time with us, and this is so valuable and so precious. I really respect that. And now you're officially part of the KhmerTree family. Going forward and moving forward, we want to continue growing and thriving together. For those who are listening and watching, Sophaline and I were just we're just two people doing things in our own lane. But at the end of the day, this is about all of us together, collectively, and we're all in this together. We came from the same roots. Now we want to go forward and really build. Sophaline, thank you so much again for spending time with us. And, for those who are listening and watching, thank you as well for spending time. We hope that you've learned something. We hope you feel inspired, even challenged. But again, this is, we're just taking one step forward individually and collectively together, so that for future generations, we really want to get to the next level and beyond together. So thank you, everybody, so much. On that note, Som Akun and Jamriap Leah.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Take care now.
Thank you for joining Love, Listings, and Legacy this week. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. If you haven't yet, go to Apple Podcasts and Spotify to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast. Join us next time as we continue to navigate the path from adversity to success, one property and one purpose-driven decision at a time. Thanks for listening.